The Birds. I'm kind of geeking out right now. I'm about to watch a Hitchcock movie in theaters.
The film's bird attacks were the result of painstaking trial and error and a combination of effects. First animated Mickey Mouse.
All right, let's talk about it. So that was The Birds, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, stars Tippi Hedren, Rod Taylor. It was released in 1963. So just 3 years after Psycho. So this was a re-release for the 60th anniversary. Shout out to God, I wish I had saved your comment, who let me know about this, and that's why I got a ticket. But shout out to you. It's interesting looking at scary movies now and looking at scary movies then, so 60 years ago, and seeing how much the genre has changed, and just seeing the differences in how we scare audiences in scary movies. There are no jump scares in this, but this movie's kind of terrifying. Now, what this movie is about really depends on who you ask. You can get multiple different answers. So Melanie Daniels is in a bird shop wanting to purchase birds, and in walks Mitch Daniels, who's all fine and dressed in a suit, and approaches her thinking she works in the store. It turns out she doesn't work in the store, and he knows that, but she doesn't know that just yet, but he's wanting to get lovebirds for his little sister who's turning 11. And, then it comes out that she doesn't actually work there, and he knows that, but he knows who she is because he saw her in court one time because she played a prank about, some glass got broken, and he's like, payback is a you-know-what. And she's like, okay, I got you, sir. So she tells the lady that actually works there, hey, you got lovebirds. She's like, no. So, well, can you get some for me, like, immediately? She's like, well, yeah, I can get you some tomorrow morning. How's that? She's like, yeah, that's great. And this is where it's funny to me. Because you know how we talk about, like, girl math? We need to talk about, like, girl investigation. You know how we'll hear, like, part of a first name, and then 5 minutes later we have an entire background check on Instagram? This is where it's funny. So she's like, okay, sir, I got you, right? So she runs outside just in time to see him driving away. She writes down his license plate, then calls the newspaper because her daddy owns a newspaper, and she talks to some dude who answers the phone. She's like, hey, I need you to get in touch with the DMV. Here's a license plate. I need this person's name and address. Gets his address, gets the lovebirds, goes to his address to drop off the lovebirds, but the neighbor's like, oh, he's not there. He's in Bodega Bay. He goes there every weekend because, that's where his little sister is. She's like, okay. So she drives on up to Bodega Bay and she goes to the post office and she's like, hey, where do these people live? And he's like, oh, look across the water over there with the trees. That's where they live. She's like, okay, the little girl, the one with the birthday, what's her name? He's like, oh, her name's Alice. And the other dude's like, nah, it's Lois. He's like, oh, well, if you just go on up the hill over there by the school in the house with the red mailbox and ask the teacher later, she can tell you the girl's name. So she drives up to the school, drives past it to the house with the red mailbox, and finds out the little girl's name. It's not Alice or Lois, it's Kathy. And it turns out that this teacher lady, Annie Hayworth, is somewhat of an ex. We don't really know the extent of it yet, but this is why Hitchcock is brilliant, because we get all the background information we need about who this lady is and how she is, related to the situation. Just simple dialogue, long cuts, facial expressions, it's brilliant. But the way she manipulated all that information, I'm like, okay, so we've always been like this. But this is what Hitchcock does when it comes to creating anxiety or keeping tension or even just scaring you just a little bit. He has these really long shots and really long cuts. It's not very quick and boom, boom, boom. He will drag out a shot and drag out a scene and keep you anxious and keep you engaged. Also, I'm going to send a copy of this to everybody who wants to be in my single life business. Because when I say this is what I'm looking for in a man, this is what I mean. Because Miss Melanie Daniels, clearly, rich girl, what have you, in the way she's dressed, her coat. She's very self-assured, very self-confident, very self-aware. And she is who she is, and she doesn't care what you think. Even when she, rolls up to this, by the bay little fishing town wearing her cute little green suit and her fur coat, she's like, well, here I am. She's a whole lady, but she's a very dominant woman. So it's not that she expects submission. It's inevitable. But then here comes Mitch. And he's like, I'll be the bulldozer to your brick wall, okay? Goes toe-to-toe with her. And this is what I'm looking for, okay? I want a man who will challenge my gangster and not take my BS. But I digress. Now, this film here, if I remember correctly, the first time I saw this movie, I was in high school. And it was my very first film class If anyone goes to Hopewell High School in Huntersville, North Carolina, let me know if they still have this class. It's called Film is Literature. So why study this film at all? Number one, it's Hitchcock, obviously. But there are other films you're probably going to see more in a film class than this one. Frenzy and Vertigo, more than likely. Also, the long shots in order to keep tension, some style choices, editing choices, theme. Another reason you would want to study this in a film class would be just the overall narrative and how it unfolds. And the way it unfolds is the MacGuffin. For those who do not know, essentially, a MacGuffin is a plot device, a plot point that is the driving force of the story. However, it is usually small and insignificant. Oftentimes, it is so small and insignificant, you forget about it. If you've ever seen Citizen Kane, as far as I'm concerned, and I Will Die on This Hill, the greatest film of all time, the MacGuffin in that film, Rosebud. Psycho, what is Psycho about? It's about a woman who gets stabbed in a hotel. Nope. Psycho was about a woman who steals $40,000. The $40,000 is the MacGuffin. The only reason we're on this long car ride that ends up at the Bates Motel is because she stole $40,000. In The Birds, the MacGuffin here is the lovebirds. The only reason these two end up meeting is because he's looking for lovebirds for his 11-year-old sister. The only reason she ends up at Bodega Bay is because she decided she wanted to be, sneaky and buy two lovebirds. And eventually you kind of forget about the lovebirds until little moments where he reminds you, what about the lovebirds? What are the lovebirds doing? Can we bring the lovebirds? Wakanda Forever tried to do a MacGuffin with Riri, and that machine didn't quite work. The one, this century movie that comes to mind when I think of MacGuffin is Letters to Juliet. The letter in that movie is the MacGuffin. That was such a fun treat, though. What an opportunity. I finally got to see a Hitchcock film in theaters. That was different. This movie relies heavily on sound, so that surround sound in a Dolby Digital theater, it makes a difference. Especially when the sound that's supposed to be scary is birds. So even from the beginning of the film, it feels like in the theater, you're surrounded by birds. Very clever. I am happy now.